In August of 1982, Stevie Ray Vaughan and Jackson Browne met at the Montreal Pop Festival, where Stevie was booed. But Jackson was impressed and invited the band to record at his rehearsal studio in Los Angeles. Later that year, over Thanksgiving, Stevie, Tommy Shannon, Chris Layton, and recording engineer Richard Mullen went out to LA to cut the record. Later on, Richard Mullen also engineered Eric Johnson. Richard Mullen knows a thing or two about great guitar tones. Well, the Texas Flood album is associated with the Dumble sound. The Dumble belonged to Jackson Browne, and Stevie took a pair of Fender Vibroverb amplifiers. The Dumble head went into a 412 bottom that was loaded with EV speakers, and the Vibroverbs were fitted with a 15-inch Altec Lansing speaker. Only one of the Vibroverbs was mic'd, and then the Dumble cabinet. The iconic Stratocaster Stevie used, affectionately named Number 1, had a neck date of December 1962 with a body from '63, but the pickups were from 1959. This is a 1958 body and neck. The studio was not a proper studio. Many years later, I understand Jackson has a proper studio, I think out in Santa Monica. I think it's Groove Masters. But at that time, the studio was a rehearsal facility, and they set up some baffles around the amplifiers. When it came to the microphones, whereas Eddie Kramer had recorded Jimi Hendrix using a combination of a Neumann U67 and a Biodynamic M160, with the general approach being the combination of a condenser and a ribbon microphone, Richard Mullen kept things much simpler, much more basic, and something many more of us can emulate. Because if you ever go out of your house and you ever play a gig where somebody's running live sound, it's invaluable to learn a thing or two about microphone technique. Over 30 years into an obsession, I've still never located information on the console or the microphone pre's that were used, but the amplifiers were mic'd up with a Shure SM57. It's a $100 microphone, and if you ever need a spare hammer for the workshop, the SM57 can also double as one. And those are current 2024 prices. One on one of the EV speakers in the Dumble cabinet, and one on the Altec Lansing speaker in the Vibroverb that was actually mic'd up, though Stevie was playing through both Vibroverbs. In July of 1996, Guitar Player magazine published an excellent interview with Richard. In the interview, Richard said that Eric and him had found that the newer SM57s just weren't working for them and didn't sound as good, and that among the older ones, some were better than the others. But he said that the only way that they'd found to identify the old ones was a ring on the microphone that would say Unidyne 3. Since most of us who are not engineers and aren't cutting a record aren't going to go down that rabbit hole, that additional piece of information is interesting. But the useful part is for us to just take the lesson where we can find it. I'm not about to recreate the Texas Flood tone, but what I am about to do is to plug this in through a tube screamer straight into the amplifier mic'd up with an SM57. So I'm going to play the same lick now 4 times and you're going to hear it back to back. Everything will be kept identical except for the microphone placement. The vintage Strat is fitted with GHS nickel rockers, which Stevie was known to use. And the fellow at GHS who's been taking care of me for 20 years knew Stevie. So Dave Cowles at GHS, first of all, thank you. Dave has validated, and this is published in some other resources, Stevie did in fact go to a lighter set of strings than he was known to use earlier on. The tube screamer is set with the tone knob in the middle, the gain all the way down, and the level up in order to boost the amplifier. These are the settings on the amplifier, and it's an old prototype that my buddy Lou from the Lewis Electric Amplifier Company built early on in his career. The first clip is with the 57 at about a 45-degree angle with the capsule parallel to the speaker cone, not to be confused with the dome. In the 1996 Guitar Player interview, Richard said the best guitar tone is going to come without any equalization. And then he said that pretty much all of Stevie's miking was done pretty close, within 2 to 3 inches of the cone, usually a little off center, usually at about a 45-degree angle to the cone. In the second clip, you'll hear the microphone in the center of the speaker. In the third clip, the mic will be moved even more to the center, and in the fourth clip, you'll hear the microphone placed way on the outer edge of the speaker. Another crucial aspect to mention is that because I had the tube screamer on, that's having a huge effect on the frequencies of your guitar tone. Take into consideration the frequency response of the microphone itself. The SM57 has a huge bump around 6 to 7K, and the frequency response of guitar speakers is anything but flat. But you don't want a flat frequency response with guitar speakers. And the sound coming off the speaker is not the same everywhere on the speaker. If you get on your hands and knees and turn your amplifier up so that all you hear is the hiss. Don't have any signal going. You want to be very, very, very careful anytime you put your ear in front of a guitar speaker. But if you do this responsibly and you put your eardrum in front of the speaker and all you hear is the hiss, the white noise, you will hear the quality of that hiss change depending on where your ear is within the speaker. In the center, it's going to be the brightest and the loudest. If a few of those variations sound a bit subtle to you, I certainly hope that it's night and day, that when I move the speaker to the outer edge of the cone, it sounds like you threw a blanket over the amplifier. If you go all the way to the outside, slight change in plans. I went deliberately trying to give you a really bad guitar tone, but between this guitar and Louis Rosano of the Lewis Electric Amplifier Company, it's a compliment to Leo Fender and Lou. So instead of sharing a nice pick guitar tone with you, which an SM57 with the frequency spike in the dead center of the cone should be unusable, and I was very surprised that I couldn't get truly terrible tone for you doing that. But even with some other really great guitars that I cherish, I can get really bad tone if I do that. So I found this stuff out by just getting on my hands and knees and listening. It helps if you have more than one person. I am the engineer, so I have to use my ears, put the microphone there, then go and assess it. I find that with the SM57, I like it about there so that the capsule of the microphone, not the body of the microphone. Notice that doesn't look like it's parallel to the paper at all, but the capsule itself. Speaker cone is at an angle, and you put it so that the capsule is at about the same angle, thus making the capsule parallel to the paper, and that smooths things out. But experiment with your ears and with your SM57, and you'll find that there is a happy medium between all spiky and too dark. Yes, I can put a Royer 121 right in the center and get a guitar sound I'm very happy with. But it's about a $1,500 microphone. These are everywhere. They're in every club. They're in everywhere you're probably going to play where anybody's running live sound. And if for no other reason than that, it's really good to teach yourself how to get a good sound using a 57. Also keep in mind that the closer you get, the greater the proximity effect. So if you move in real close on the mic, you get the radio effect. But the further you back things up, the less proximity effect, the less the direct sound, and the more you're going to hear an element of the room. But of course, in any kind of live situation, close miking is what they do. Brother Jimmy Vaughan, in a podcast only a couple years ago, indicated that for the first Fabulous Thunderbirds album, Jimmy had a completely different attitude, approach, and ethos to this stuff. Jimmy didn't think too much of engineers who would get down there with flashlights and try to get the microphone in exactly the right spot. And what they were going for was a big room sound. So on the Fabulous Thunderbirds records, it was a completely different approach to capturing the guitar tone. Chasing more and better tone has been central to my journey over the past 3 decades, and it's a journey that continues to go on. So enjoy your process with it as well, and I'll see you again tomorrow.